everyone, and welcome. This is the Dr. Mom Podcast.
It is Thursday evening? I can't keep up anymore. It is Thursday evening. We are back with another episode of Dr. Mom. Mom, how are you?
Well.
Mom?
Yes.
For a long time, you put marriage and family... Dr. Joan Feinstein, forensic psychologist. What is a forensic psychologist? Because whenever I read that, I thought, CSI, criminals and stuff. Is that accurate, or is that not really what the terminology is?
Somewhat accurate. Forensics is anything that interacts with the law. So where psychology and the law would interact. So for MFRC, custody evaluations, criminal evaluations, clearances to carry firearms. I did work for the federal defenders, giving sentencing recommendations to judges. That's some of the forensic work that I did.
Tell us a little bit about that.
Which part? All of it? Anything in?
So, real quick, so everybody who's listening can understand, my mother wanted to talk about, forgiveness, being that it's Yom Kippur today, as most of you may know. Mom, happy Yom Kippur.
Have an easy fast. Not the holiday.
I was going to say, have an easy fast. But I, as the producer of her podcast, if you will, I've seen this going on. The entire story itself doesn't make any sense, which I'm sure we'll definitely get to that in a second. And I wanted to talk a little bit about Gabby. How do you say her name? Gabby Petito's?
Petito.
Gabby Petito's disappearance. Okay, Gabby Petito's disappearance doesn't make any sense. So right before I was reading a little bit about Gabby, I took a few seconds and I was watching a video, as I often do, about police interactions and stuff like that. Just so everybody knows, I'm very interested in all that stuff. I trained police officers for a couple of years in close range self-defense. So I'm always interested in law enforcement, criminal psychology, stuff like that. I do, however, have a very big issue with stories like Gabby's and the video that I'm about to tell you about, which is where I saw an 8-year-old girl get kidnapped in broad daylight. Her mom's walking her. It's a sound suburban neighborhood. As we know, kidnappings can take place anywhere. Some people think I'm crazy for always telling Monica to be aware of her surroundings and watch who's around her and watch people's body language, watch the way they're looking at her or the kids, stuff like that. This little girl was just grabbed out of her mom's arms in broad daylight. Luckily, the Dallas-Fort Worth Police Department put together a squad very quickly, and 8 hours later, they located her at a nearby hotel. Her perpetrator was taken into custody. She was found safe and alive, but I'm sure, Mom, you can speak to even though she was found safe and alive, which thank God, there will be years of therapy ahead of her for what actually took place. This 8-year-old girl.
Oh, absolutely. And for the family, and she'll have PTSD for, like you said, probably for life, because this happened during her formative years. And people say silly things like, oh, get over it. But you don't get over anything that happens in your formative years. That's why they call it the formative years.
Right. And the parents, like you said, right? Like anytime they go to a restaurant, if she goes to the bathroom by herself, if she wants to go to a sleepover, if she gets to that point, mom and dad, even though they know that the perpetrator was caught and he's actually going to jail for the rest of his life, me as a dad, I know that I would need to work through the trauma, because I would keep thinking to myself, well, remember how it was when she was gone for 8 hours. I didn't know if I was going to see her again. I just, so many thoughts went through my head, and I would still be recovering. Does that make sense?
It makes sense. And that's a hard one. The hardest kind of PTSD is when there's nothing to correct. So, for example, you said they weren't out at a strange time. They didn't visit a high crime area. So when there's nothing you can correct, that's really hard on people's psyches. It's called the just world hypothesis. So what we tend to do, we want everything to have a rational basis. We like A to lead to B, to C, to D. There has to be some rational connection.
And you can say that this happened for a reason.
Sure. And the classic
and
one,
learn from it.
exactly, and learn from it and modify. So I see a lot of MVA, motor vehicle accidents.
Hmm.
The worst one, everybody thinks the worst one is head on. You see it coming. That is not the worst one psychologically. The worst one psychologically is when you're stopped at a red light and somebody hits you from behind. Because what are you going to adjust? What are you
Yeah,
going to say you're going to do differently?
you
So
have to
what
stop again.
you have to stop again. So the rear ending, they never want to stop again for the first year that they drive afterwards. Having been the victim of a rear ending, I can tell you that's really true. It's very hard when there's nothing, like you said, to learn from it. So that would be very traumatic because that makes the world not just. Listen, we all do it. We read a story about a rape victim, and what do we want? We scan it, and we want to make sense of it. So we say she shouldn't have been out that late. She shouldn't have worn that little black dress. She shouldn't have been in that neighborhood. That's your psyche trying to do that just world, because the opposite is that life is random. Very hard concept. If you got up every day and really thought about life is random, we just looked at 911, right? We just
Hmm.
had the memorial. So random. I
Yeah.
read this story about a 26-year-old from Bucks County who wasn't working there. At the last minute, his friend helped him, asked him to help set up something in the restaurant. Was that called Windows of the World, the restaurant? So he didn't even
Something like
work,
that. Yeah.
something like that. Last minute, decides to help the friend, killed. Is life random? But you can't function that way every day. You're the parent of 4 kids. It would be excruciating for you to every day say life is random. It doesn't follow a pattern. There's really nothing I can do to protect those 4 beautiful kids. Life is life. We can't live that way. It would create too much anxiety. So yes, I think that in that case that you just described, the trauma will be there. The key is to triumph over the trauma, to not let it take over your life. But that's a hard task. That's a
Yeah.
daunting.
Yeah, one of the things, because I do worry about this, as you know, and I think that people don't understand that when you're, let's just say you're a first responder, right? You're a first responder, you're a police officer, you're a firefighter, you're an EMT. There was actually a TV show on it got canceled, even though I know a ton of people would love to see it come back. It was called Southland. And one of the detectives, he wasn't a main character, he was a background character. He would do things like sneak in through his daughter's window if it was left open. He would do things like to test her, and she would just end up losing her mind, right? Because she's a teenage girl. She'd be like, "Dad, like, why do you have to do this?" And he would lay out the stats about what he sees every day. You know, somebody snuck in through a girl's window. What was her name? Amy Smart, was that her name? Came in through the window.
I'm not.
That,
I don't. I'm not know the
what
show.
was it? No, the girl kidnapped. Real
Oh,
life.
Amy. Elizabeth Smart.
Elizabeth Smart kidnapped through her window, right?
I'm not
Something like
sure.
that.
Yeah, something like that. But right, right.
So
Again,
I always
not.
tell Monica, like, are the windows, like, we have sensors on the windows, like, you know, I'm not going to give away too many details, but like we have home security system, but then small things like, did we lock the door? Some people say there's a Tim Kennedy special forces operator who has a company called Sheepdog Response, where he trains police officers to be better at their trade, more with the hands-on and technical stuff. But he always talks about the simple things you can do to protect your household. And one of them, if you're listening, people, I'm big on this one. I learned it and I'll never forget it. He said a lot of people think you should turn your porch light off at night. He said you should not. Yes, police officers patrol their areas. Yes, they know them like the back of their hand, but they don't pay attention to house numbers sometimes. So if your house number is not lit up or visible, they may have a difficult time finding you in the middle of a struggle, intruder, something of that nature. So anyway, the point I'm trying to make is that I'm very big on these things, and I think it comes from having a very big interest in law enforcement, watching body cam footage, which can be extremely violent. Nowadays, you actually see, you know, people being killed or the struggle taking place. And then, you know, seeing everything we all see. Like I said, I'm scrolling on Facebook and I see a video of an 8-year-old girl that was abducted. So it doesn't sit with me well. And I end up worrying and pondering and, you know, always telling people, if you follow me on Facebook, I'm always saying you prepare for the day that you hope never comes. So I guess my long-winded explanation, or what I'm trying to say, is that, Alexis, from a very young age, I wanted her to know how to fight, and it actually makes me feel better that she knows how to throw a punch, that she knows how to at least get away from an attacker. You don't want to stay and engage if your attacker is bigger than you, or has more of a purpose and is going to keep coming at you. But yeah, long story short, this long-winded explanation I'm giving is that from what I've seen, training police officers, all these things boiled together, it can make you think differently. Does that make sense? And now I'm always like looking over my shoulder, always checking in with Alexis. I'm always telling Monica to do this, that, or the kids. So yeah,
Well,
I see it differently.
it goes back to one of my favorite words, balance. But you don't want kids to have so much anxiety. So you have to find that balance between, having them be aware. I like what you said, telling Monica always to be aware of her surroundings. Everybody should, especially women, especially females. They have to always be around, aware of their surroundings. But finding that balance between living somewhat, right, of a happy, anxiety-free life, but also being aware. And as you said, it's not so easy today to do that. It's off topic, but for any parent listening, because I spend half my day of every day with teens go out the window. Everybody thinks not my kid. Teens go out the window. The kids I work with will be unhappy if they hear this. The boyfriends come in through the window. What goes on in the window is unreal. So you have to spot check. You absolutely have to spot check, because teens don't think that anything's going to happen to them. Unfortunately, if you ask any police officer what's the most dangerous time, it's just when the teens go out the window. It's from midnight to 2 a.m. And what happens at 2 a.m.? What
There's
closes?
nobody looking around. Well, there's nobody looking around. There's nobody outside. There's
And
nothing to see.
And some of the bars close.
Oh, when I was driving to New York City every day, I had to leave at like 2:30, 3:30 a.m. And I always told people that was the most terrifying time for me to drive. I don't know if they're drunk. I don't know if they're this. I don't know if they're that. That's like the worst time to be out ever.
100%. Absolutely. So everybody think about that balance between being aware, being safe, and not putting so much anxiety, because kids don't like that and teenagers don't like that. You know that. So you have to find a way to speak to them that they aren't saying, "Oh, Dad, nothing's going to happen to me." That's the resistance you have to get through. The other thing is, I think girls walking alone is never a good idea. We can get to why I think that it's hard to get them to always buddy up. But if you understood and spend time with pedophiles like I have, then you would understand the psychology of why girls should not walk alone.
So I'm going to stop you right there, because what I'm going to ask is going to lead into that. So I'm going to ask you one more question, and then we're going to finally take a deep dive into Gabby Petito's case and a few other things I wanted to talk to you about. Do you find it's more effective, because this is what I do with Alexis, and I think she understands, is I just tell her how it is. I don't try to say, don't do this, don't do this. I'll say, don't do this, and then I will list the graphic reasons sometimes about why I'm telling her not to do that. I'll say, there was a case like this, there was this, there was this. Oh, do you find it's effective? Because I've Jocko Willink, who we all know that I love and admire as an influencer, he always says that you can't just give an order without no reason. It's so important to tell your team why you're doing what you're doing. What do you think about that? Are their minds too frail? Is there a time and a place? What do you think about telling our teenagers or our kids why we don't want them to go out the window?
That's one of those 5 questions in one, 5 for 1. All right. So I wish he had said, and especially with teens, always give a reason. So one thing teens resent is the parent who says, I don't have to give you a reason. You just have to do it, right? That's not, yeah. It still happens a lot. I hear it in my office. So that's not a good strategy. But remember what I said on other podcasts about feedback. So timing is good. Saying, hey, there's something I want to talk to you about. Let me know when it's a good time. That's a good thing, because a teenager wants to exert some control. They have lots of issues with control. So they don't want the parent to just propound them, or grandparent or aunt or uncle, with feedback. So getting permission, so to speak, because the relationship's changing with teens. It's not authoritative anymore. It has to move into a little bit more collaborative relationship. So that's important. But absolutely, give a reason because, like I said, I think it's not the most effective parenting style to say you just have to listen because. But the thing that the kids don't like is tying it, they don't feel that it ties to their reality. So they don't like, they feel that you're not you, but in general, oh, the parent's just having anxiety. What does this
It'll
have
never
to do
happen
with
to
me?
me.
Exactly. That's the
That's the
resistance.
worst thing anybody can ever think. When you're driving, when you're texting and driving, when you're walking down the street, it could never happen to me is the worst thing you can think.
It is. But again, you have to understand that you can't live with that in the forefront of your mind because unfortunately, I see victims of crime, victims of horrific accidents, and they do live with that in the forefront of their mind for a while. And then you have not such a good result, right? Then they become emotionally handicapped. So, again, some kind of balance where you address that issue and say, one of the things our mind does, Alexis, one of the things we do is we have fantasies. John Anthony
Negative.
talks about the negative fantasies, but there's positive fantasies that nothing's ever going to happen to us. And that really isn't going to protect you the best way. So you can't walk around saying something awful is going to happen all the time, but you have to be realistic that you're not immune from everything. You have to get through to that, have them create a different kind of thought process.
I don't trust anybody. No, I'm not, it's not that I don't trust anybody. Through my martial arts training and things like this, and this is going to be a fun little fact. It's not a secret. So, you know how you have to kind of get into a rhythm when you're fighting, right? You have to find a rhythm with your feet, you have to find your stance and
Right.
stuff like that. My body, and this isn't tough guy talk, this is just me explaining what my mind does after years of training and like I said, watching all these videos and studying and this and that. If I feel like somebody's too close to me and I don't know them and I may not know what their intentions are and they're behind me, I work in a hotel, it happens all the time. If it just doesn't feel right, and it's often nothing, right? But if it doesn't feel right, my body instinctively starts to find that rhythm, and here's what I do. I start tapping my fingers together. And it's not me thinking about it, just instinctively my mind is finding a rhythm in case I need to defend myself. It's just a weird tick, if you will, from years of training. I can't move my feet. I can't start dancing. This person may not have intentions, right? So I just keep my hands down. I just start tapping my finger, like in case I need to start doing something, whatever that may be. Um,
See, I
I'm
wouldn't
always
call
ready.
it. I wouldn't call it a tick. I'd say your psyche doesn't want you to forget. It's channeling that energy into something so that you don't forget. So that I
I
think
like
that's a
that.
good thing, right? It's not a tick. You're channeling that energy because you don't want to forget it. I want everybody. I hope everybody that's listening or listens in future days. I want to challenge everybody. I hope you challenge people too, Ryan, to listen to people's language because Ryan and I have done some podcasts on communication. So listen to people's language and they'll go like this. My husband would never hurt me. You don't know that. My wife would never hurt me. So I say, and sometimes the people don't like it, and teenagers say, "Oh, I know my boyfriend. He would never cheat. He would never do this, that." I say, you know what? That's a very strong statement. I don't like strong statements as much as I like moderate statements. How about we
Right.
say, how about we say it's unlikely they would cheat. It's unlikely they would hurt me. But here's the thing. I'm not going to tell you I would never kill anybody because if somebody was hurting one of your kids and I could get my hands on something to hurt them, I'd hurt them. So the more accurate statement is it's unlikely, but nobody knows what they'll do in certain situations,
I,
whether it's a
I
self defense, right? So,
yeah.
but I'm challenging everybody listen to people's language and they'll make absolutes. Oh, they would never. I would never. I'm never going to do this or that. You don't know that.
I think that's a very good point. I think it's something that people don't think about because one thing that I think, and we're hopefully going to touch on this tonight as we go through everything with, unfortunately, with what's going on with Gabby Petito, is I, how do I say this? I think that nobody knows anybody entirely. Nobody knows who anybody is. Everybody has skeletons in their closet. Some people may get aroused by different things. Some people may not like different things. Some people may not like hearing people chew. Some people may not like the color blue. Some people may not whatever. Something might set that person off, or that person has certain interests that society may not agree with, or that person has done something in their past that people might not agree with, or just flat out isn't right, and you don't know that that took place in that person's life. Does that make sense?
That's
So,
1,000% true.
so like even my beautiful wife, whom I love more than anything, and I'm not saying that she has some secret life, but I don't know everything that she's done in her life. There's probably something that she will never tell me about, and I think that's something that people should accept. But my point is that you never really know who everybody is.
Or how they'll respond in certain situations. That's why when people say, I'm sure I know, no, you're not. You're
Oh
not
yeah,
sure.
no, don't be sure. Don't, because then I think it's important to say you're not sure, not as a defense, not in a negative way, but I think it's very important in every aspect of our lives to keep an open mind and perspective. Does that make sense? Because
It
that
does.
way you're always prepared, right?
Right.
If you're never shocked because you were prepared and kept that open mind. Does that make sense?
It does. And one of the things when I worked in the prisons and took some training in forensics, I remember some of the prison personnel saying the same thing that I'm saying, and saying they could show me the corpses of women who made the statement, he'll never. And that was chilling.
Right.
That was
That is
chilling.
chilling. That is
That was
chilling.
chilling.
Yeah, no. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. But first, real quick, to your biggest fan, Marla, I think it is important to learn how to rely on your intuition. I agree, Marla. When you feel, I'm big on this. When you feel something or think something, you are usually correct. Your mind always tries to protect us. Learn to hear and listen to your inner voice. I'm big on that, and that's something as we're going to deep dive into right now because we spent a good 20 minutes talking about other things. So, Gabby Petito, right off the bat, let me just ask you, Mom, because I know everybody has an opinion. This guy, just the way he went about coming home. Now, and let's be clear, it is 8:23 p.m. on September 16, 2021. Right now, he is guilty of nothing. He is innocent until proven guilty. Let us be clear. My mom's a lawyer. I don't want to be making any statements, right?
Right.
Because nothing is proven right now, but nothing in this story makes any sense. So what are your thoughts on just the story itself?
So I will get to that one second. I just want to say to Marla's point, in other cultures, they're shocked at how we raise our kids, that we don't teach kids to rely on their instincts. So that's an excellent point. If you look at studies, they say Americans really do too much for the kids and are too overprotective, and that defies the process, especially for young girls, of cultivating their own instincts. So I thought that was a great point.
Yes.
So, okay, so in analyzing what's going on here, I'm glad you said he's not guilty of a crime. As an attorney, as a mental health doctor, as a citizen of this country, it does upset me. If you look on Facebook, I joined Brian Laundrie's Facebook group of people who want justice for Gabby, but they already convicted him of multiple crimes. That
The
is not
public
good.
court, right?
The public court, that is not
Worst out
good,
there.
and that will make him withdraw probably even more. So that's not a good thing. So I went back and looked at some of the high profile domestic violence cases. So if I throw out the name Lacey Peterson, Scott Peterson, I don't think there's any listener who doesn't know that. If I throw out the name Craig Rabinowitz, and by the way, I went to law school with Stephanie Rabinowitz. If I throw out multiple names of
OJ
women,
Simpson.
right, all of them. But here's what's driving America crazy. And tell me, anybody listening, if this is what it is. All those men, the man who told his wife he got into law school years ago, beautiful girl. And then she got some paper that said he was rejected and he murdered her. He was hand in hand organizing well, in the time that she was missing, before they knew that he murdered her, he was organizing a search party. Scott Peterson said, I don't know, she disappeared. Craig Rabinowitz said that Stephanie took some sleeping medicine. She hit her head. She drowned in the water. Every single one made up a what? An
Can I say
alibi.
something?
Sure.
I think the audio is still out there if you look on YouTube. OJ Simpson, when the detectives were able to connect with him in the white Bronco during that low speed chase that went on for quite a bit, he kept saying, and I don't quote me, but I'm pretty sure he said it. I just wanted to love her. I just wanted to love her. So he's not admitting. He's just saying, I just wanted to love her. It's like, well, nobody really asked you about that. And if you go through the timeline, it wasn't that he murdered Nicole and started running. It was that he had to turn himself in, and then he started running, and then he started saying that I just wanted to love her.
Right. Exactly. So, but he spoke. He said something.
Yeah.
So what's driving America, and I heard it spread to other countries, crazy. Am I right that he's not offering anything up? He's not making any alibi explanation.
And he drove home without her. Like, that, to me, that's mind-blowing.
So 2 things about that. One, if she voluntarily left him, why would she leave without her vehicle?
Mm-hmm.
That's driving me crazy. Why would she voluntarily leave without her vehicle? But the second thing I think that's bothering the country is he's not treating it like a missing person. So often when it's when the boyfriend or spouse or husband committed the crime, there's a period in between the crime being committed and everybody finds out what happened where they're quote unquote missing. Agreed? There's some period where they pretend that they're missing and they treat it like a missing person. But you see, people go on and they don't articulate it the right way. One is why he's not giving any information. But 2, in no way, there is no way that he's treating it like a missing person.
No,
that's what's driving everybody to say, how could he not treat it like a missing person? Then one of 2 things is true, right?
Yeah.
That 1, he did do something to her and he doesn't want her found. Or 2, it's similar. He knows she's not missing.
So let's jump ahead real quick because I just saw a photo and I know that symbol anywhere from watching all the police officer videos I do. So I know that there's a few chilling details that have just come up. So let's go through the timeline. Sure. June 21st, 2021, Northport Police Chief Todd Garrison said in the Thursday news briefing that Petito and Laundrie, I apologize if I'm not saying their names correctly,
That's right.
Garrison described as the woman's fiance, embarked on a cross-country trip in June. So we know that they started a YouTube page. Apparently, to those of you that are listening, the YouTube page was not consistent. There was just one post, okay? So it wasn't like they were influencers and they had all these followings. They perhaps were trying for that, but they did not get there.
It was pretty new, though. I think her YouTube was a pretty new thing, but go ahead.
What? Okay.
I think she was just starting out. That's what she wanted to do.
So here's what I just saw, and I know this symbol anywhere. This is body cam footage from a police officer's body cam. So let's see this. August 12th, 2021, Moab, Utah. Police had an encounter with the couple on August 12th where officers described them as having engaged in some sort of altercation. I just read about this. Although the 2 are described as getting into a physical fight following an argument, both the male and female reported they are in love and engaged to be married and desperately didn't wish to see anyone charged with a crime. So just so everyone knows, body cam footage, the audio does not start until the button is pressed. And in the event that an incident does take place and the officer does have the ability to hit the button, then the body cam footage will release, I believe it's 60 seconds of prior audio, perhaps 30 seconds. So the body cam is running. Some departments do not require them to run all the time. So the body cam is running and they do have footage. So here we have it. They did get into some sort of altercation on August 12th, and there she is. So both of them spoke to police officers. Some sort of physical altercation took place. For those of you that are listening, apparently somebody else saw it taking place and called it in. So she did not call. Gabby did not call. Brian did not call. Somebody watching made the call. The police intervened. No charges were filed, and they moved on. Last week of August, Petito's family told police they were last in contact with her during the last week of August Northport police said. Before the last communication, Petito is believed to have been in Grand Teton National Park in Wyoming, police say. In a Thursday news conference, Petito family attorney Richard Stafford said the family's last communication with Petito was August 30th, but they did not believe the message they received was from Petito. It was a text message. This is what I read. So apparently, before I go any further, she was calling every single day to check in and say what was going on and tell the family where they were going and the adventures they were having. But apparently, the last transmission was via text, which was out of character for what was going on. So, in a Thursday news conference, Petito family attorney Richard Stafford, but they did not believe the message they received was from Petito. He declined to share what the message said or why they did not believe it was her writing. September 1st, Laundrie returned with the couple's Northport home. The home was in a van. September 11th, after not being able to get in touch with her, Petito's family, who lives in New York, reported her missing on Saturday evening in the Suffolk County, New York Police Department. And last but not least, September 16th, in a letter read by Stafford, the Petito family attorney, during police's Thursday news briefing, the missing woman's family begged for Laundrie's family to help in the investigation. So it's being reported that Brian Laundrie, the fiance of Gabby Petito, who is missing, is not cooperating in any way, shape, or form. Some people believe that they're defending Brian, or they. I'm not going to go into any details because, again, these are allegations. He is innocent until proven guilty, and my mother is a lawyer, so we want to make that very clear. We are not proving him guilty. But, Mom, you're a lawyer, you're a family therapist. You see different types of people, different types of minds, criminals, child molesters, unfortunately, the worst kind of people that walk the earth. You worked in a prison for a little bit in your earlier years. None of this looks good for Brian, would you say?
I would say none of it looks good. Let's go back to August 12th. On August 13th, two bodies were found. I don't know if you were aware of this.
I heard something about this.
It was a gay couple.
Oh, yeah.
And that was on August 13th. The two women were found murdered with their clothes pulled down, probably sexually assaulted. The police have said they're not ruling out that there could possibly be a link. So keep that in mind. The timeline, the proximity, and the location are very suspicious. So that's
this is the first article.
piece of it.
Sorry to cut you off. This is the first article I pulled up with what my mother's talking about. Lesbian couple shot dead in Utah after alerting friends to creepy guy near the campsite. For those of you that are just joining us and getting caught up, the creepy guy is allegedly Brian Laundrie, who is being accused of playing a part in Gabby Petito's disappearance. So this right here is what my mother's referring to. Lesbian couple shot dead in Utah after alerting friends to creepy guy near the campsite. Some people are saying that police are looking into the possibility that the creepy guy was Brian Laundrie.
Here's a statistic. I quoted it before on pedophiles. By the time a pedophile is captured, they've had minimum of 11 previous assaults. So I'm just throwing that out. So by the time somebody is captured, that's not their first crime.
Right.
So I think that's what I don't know if that's what the police are thinking. But now, here's something interesting. Right before our show, Gabby's godmother was interviewed. I don't know if anyone saw that, and said the couple, Gabby and Brian, visited frequently. Absolutely no red flags. Nothing. No red flags. He had a good relationship with her parents. She lived with his parents for a year. No one saw anything, which goes to your point of nobody really knows anybody all that well, right?
You don't know anybody.
We think we don't know anybody that well. But it's kind of eerie, the proximity in timeline and geographically to the murder of the lesbian couple. But you see, I don't want to jump to, well, he was the creepy guy, but it could have been something else. And one thing the police or his attorney said, which I do agree with, is in all these situations, even when men are innocent, they panic because they're going to be the first person that's looked to. It's got to be really uncomfortable. when a female in a relationship is missing or something happens because the boyfriend is the first person that's looked to.
Somebody said that in an article where they basically were saying that they're not saying that Brian did it. Somebody at the end said that perhaps there was a freak accident and he freaked out. Whatever it may have been, right? If they're
I was
in,
thinking that he's in some kind of shock or something.
if
I
they're in,
won't.
okay. So what does somebody in shock with this particular
Well,
timeline? What sort of characteristics do they represent? Because we're trying to be fair to. Okay, so before we go any further, we're trying to be fair to somebody who experienced a traumatic incident, right? So heaven forbid I saw Monica fall off a cliff. I don't know how I would act. And mom, maybe you could speak to, but let's do this. First, define what shock may be because it may not be present on the surface, right? It can, I remember I heard it can last for days.
most psychological shock is a protective mechanism that the psyche can't accept something. So there's this funny phenomena. Sometimes in the hospital, you give somebody bad news that somebody passed away, and the family member laughs. And the laughter, everybody says it's inappropriate. No, it isn't. It's shock. It's the inability of the psyche to process everything. Because if it did process everything at once, it would be disastrous to the person's emotional well being. But let's go back to, I'll answer all your questions, I promise. But I want to go back to what I said about the vaccine, the virus. Everybody has tried and committed Brian pretty much on social media, and they don't even have all the facts.
Right,
And
right,
that's what
right.
I was saying. We've become such a non fact based society. So let's
Well,
go with the facts. The
can I
fact
just say
is,
something?
sure, sure.
Because I think this is very important, and I don't need everybody to agree with me, but that's one. Let me just say this real quick while we're on this podcast. We're talking about. You said in the beginning we have women who you don't agree with women walking by themselves, right? It's let's just be honest. Women are more of a target in general. Guys, I don't care what you say. Women
Of
are just more of a target
course.
in
Of
general.
course.
Um, whatever. It's just the reality. I don't mean to say whatever. I'm sorry. Flip side of that coin is I have two boys, right? And a lot of times we hear about rape allegations where it just didn't happen, right? And Monica and I were talking the other day, just talking about the boys as we always do when we want to raise them to be mindful about every situation. The same way we want to raise our kids, boy, girl, whatever, to be aware of situations and be smart. We were talking about having the conversation with the boys. If you don't know a young lady, you don't know her well, do not be alone with her in certain situations because if there has been times where a young lady has said she was raped and the gentleman who has to go through the process of his life being destroyed, it comes out on the other end that it never happened, right? And one thing I learned a long time ago in school, they said this. They're like, listen, even if it doesn't happen, it can still ruin your reputation for life, right? So it goes both ways. And what my long-winded example is, I'm always very, I don't want to say someone's guilty unless a court says they're guilty. Does that make sense? Because I don't agree with the whole public
Yes.
opinion thing.
If you saw, because I write some forensic reports for rape cases, if you saw what happened, yes, you would have a lot of anxiety raising two boys. There was one where the alleged rapist almost lost a very prominent job until I uncovered that after the woman said that she was raped by him, her then boyfriend, she moved, gave him the new address, and had him come many, many times afterwards. And then her credibility went down the drain, right? Because
Right.
she moved, she got away from him, and then still had him come over. So if you saw what really happened, a lot of these date rapes and boyfriend girlfriend rapes are really relationship problems, and they
Right.
get angry and then cry rape. So I think that is really good advice. But back, and you're absolutely right. It's scary to be a young boy. A lot on the college campuses too.
Right. Right.
There's
Yeah.
so much of that. But back to the facts. Here's the one fact that troubles me. How come, and this is factually correct, I don't think anyone could argue, how come he's not acting like she's missing? That's what everybody should be saying.
Right.
He's not acting like she's missing. So does that mean he knows she's not missing? Because tell me one place where he's acting like they can't find her. That's troublesome.
Yeah.
The fact that the family members are saying he was close to the parents, wouldn't he want to console them or be with them? So factually, we have to come to somewhat of a conclusory statement that for some reason it's looking like he doesn't want her to be found because he's not participating in acting like it's a missing person or helping. He's got
It-
information. He clearly knows the last time he saw her. And one of my attorney friends said, "Why doesn't he just write a statement? This is the last time I saw her. This is what she was wearing." And that's that.
no, I think that a lot. Well, a lot of people are very interested in crime dramas these days.
Of course.
Netflix puts out a lot of great documentaries. Um, I think if I was a detective, and you don't agitate him. I'd be like,
Right.
Brian, listen, we've been here for hours. I'm not asking you to tell me what happened. I'm just asking you to tell me when you last saw her. That's all I want to
Right.
know. That's all I want to
That's
know,
what
and I'll
they
let you go. Just tell me when you last saw her, so if she's in trouble, we can help her.
But obviously he's acting, I would say, out of some fear. But before we get to him, let's talk about the family for a minute.
Okay.
So there was a terrible case in Montgomery County last summer, Morgan McCarthy. And the young girl was in an abusive relationship, 18 years old, and the boyfriend was bad. It was documented. Her friends knew he was abusive, and she got out of it. And then she made literally the fatal mistake. He called and said, "Let's have a rapprochement, one more talk." And she met him at the Jenkintown train station,
Oh yeah, I remember.
right near where your grandparents lived. And he stabbed her 30 sometimes.
30 sometimes.
30 sometimes. And the police taught me that the worst perpetrator is when you stab somebody. You're looking them in the eye, they're dying, and you're repeatedly not caring.
Can I tell you
You
something real
have to,
quick?
sure.
It connects to what you said, and one of the lines that always sticks out to me in The Dark Knight, if any of you know me, I'm a huge Batman fan, is the Joker says, and some people might be like, "Oh, that's a cool line," but when you think about it, it's very chilling, but also very true. He's saying to a detective, he asks him, "Can you remind me again how many of your cop friends I killed?" And he tells him, and then the Joker goes on to say, "Do you want to know who's really a coward at the end of their life?" Right? Because you don't know how somebody's going to react when you're begging and pleading and this and that. And I can't remember if it's in the movie or in the comic book, but at some point, the Joker does say that if you want to really enjoy killing somebody, you'll use a knife because
Wow.
the death will not be immediate. It'll be slow. You'll
Yeah.
see them begging for their life. I am, I have an issue
Abs-
with knives. I do. I have an issue with knives.
I can't even imagine the suffering Megan McCarthy went through. Now, the perpetrator, if you can bring up his name, because I want to give the mom credit. That
What
mom,
was the girl's name? I'm so sorry, I forget her name.
it was Morgan McCarthy, an Abington,
I do remember
beautiful
where it
girl.
took place.
And I want to make the point. It's so important.
McCaffrey?
McCaffrey, like the supermarket, I believe it was.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, some of the kids I treat knew her and were so devastated. He, the perpetrator, because I want to get the mom's name right and give her the full credit, came home just acting strange and had blood. Long story short, the mom called the police on her own son, and she did the right thing.
She did the right thing. Yep.
She did the right thing. Let's get her name because I want to give her credit. That had to be heart wrenching, but she called the police. And
Go on. You can keep talking.
I think, his hearing is coming up soon. But anyway,
He's found guilty. Alleged killer's family called 911 after finding him covered in blood following stabbing of ex-girlfriend in Montgomery County. Um, it just says family. Let me see if I can read down.
thank you for finding it. And see, they called. They did the right. heroic, painful, gut-wrenching thing, but they did it. While you're looking it up, the other case that I got obsessed with was Tristan Bailey, 13-year-old cheerleader, and the classmate stabbed her 114 times. That mother washed the blood out of his jeans. That mother is like Brian Laundrie's family. So there's a family dynamic here.
Stop. Brian's not guilty yet, just so we can reiterate to people.
No, he's not guilty.
I know what
but
you're
there's-
saying, but just so nobody twists our words, we're not
No.
saying Brian's guilty yet.
There's a family dynamic that they cut the communication off. I mean,
yeah.
the painful emotional thing right now is him not acting like she's missing and the family not cooperating. A parent is pleading their child is missing. And like you said, just tell us the last.
Tell me where
place.
you last saw her.
So he's actually thwarting, would you say? Thwarting the effort to rescue her. And that's the part people aren't articulating enough, I think. And really, you have to say, what's in his psyche that he could watch people, the stepfather, crying, pleading, and just say, I'm going to take a back seat. What could be in his psyche? That's what people are saying, to be that cold. Now, I am an attorney. Constitutionally, he doesn't have to do anything. And he and the lawyer quote the law. They don't have to do anything. But what about morality? What about emotional, the emotional side and what they're doing to the parent? And I have to say something. If anybody took this stance and they did commit a crime, if they did, working in a prison, he's not going to have a good time if he God forbid, did commit some crime and ended up there. Because the inmates will not like what he did and how he tortured that family.
Let me ask you something.
I just don't understand the thinking, but go ahead.
Hold on. I need to remember what I was going to ask. Brian,
did we find the perpetrator on Morgan McCarthy? Forget his name.
Yeah, it was Newton. His name was Newton.
That was it.
Oh, okay. So from a legal standpoint, and I'm not giving anybody any ideas here.
I think I know what you're going to ask.
Yeah, the police, the detectives, they are doing their jobs, I would imagine. They have a lot of ground to cover since this couple was going across the country, so it's going to involve multiple agencies. They have to find something before they can take him into custody, right? A drop of blood, something. They have to find something.
They have to find something. They didn't have to have a search warrant for the van because she was the owner of the van.
Right.
So I don't know. I did hear the godmother say the police have something, but it's not released yet. So it can take them some time. You know why? Because they don't want they don't want to make any mistakes now.
You don't want to mistrial.
Right.
It's too far in. It's not a mistrial. You lose the evidence. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't add up. Yeah.
Yeah, they don't want to violate any of his rights. But let's get back to his psyche, the question on America's mind. So right now, what no one likes is that a young, absolutely beautiful girl, her whole life ahead of her, is missing. And what's Brian's primary concern? His legal rights. It doesn't add up, does it? How is that his primary concern? She was his fiance. So when his concern for himself and his legal rights is trumping his concern for her life and where she is, that doesn't make sense. It doesn't add up to anyone. I'm sure, because I spent most of my adult life treating young people, I'm sure that when you're 23, like Brian, I'm certain, and she's missing, part of you feels like you don't want to live. I'm not saying that's a good thing. I'm just saying in the aftermath, that young and engaged and your life together, part of you would feel like you don't even want to live. You wouldn't even want to protect yourself. You're not worried about yourself. You just want to find your partner. And this is the part that all of us are saying we don't understand how his priority to help himself trumps that. And we don't understand how he's impervious to the parent's suffering. And that's why people are saying he's antisocial or a sociopath. That they're saying he has to be because he's not feeling anything. That's a normal feeling that you would feel in this situation. Does that make sense? How could he not? How could he only be concerned and quoting the law and using her last name? In the statement from the lawyer, her last name was used. And I just have to say, in custody court, when people are so angry at each other and they've parented a kid together and they start using the last name, it drives me crazy. And don't do it. It's a bad strategy. How is he using her last name? How is he not in TV crying, saying, please return her? It doesn't mean he committed a crime, but it does mean, as a mental health doctor, that something is off with his ability to relate to what the parents are going through. That's factually correct. That America can say with confidence.
So
it is not a normal emotional reaction.
So with the last 9 minutes, I'm sorry I heard everything you said and I agree with everything you said. With the last 9 minutes, my biggest question for you is Ted Bundy, O.J. Simpson, all these people who we all know are famous for the crimes they committed. Some people just caught by sheer luck, right? Who was it? I can't think of his name. He worked at the ice cream factory. Serial killer. Whatever the case may be. Can you, as a psychologist, and again, we're not trying to redefine the law or rewrite Black's dictionary of the law. Can you, as a psychologist who has worked in the profession for 40 years on multiple cases, family related, worked in a prison, crime, all of this, what sort of characteristics can any normal person see in people like this? Or is it just really something that you never, ever see coming? Like, for example, if I was trained, if I'm about to get into an altercation, figure out little things. His watch is on his left arm, so he's right-handed. His cell phone, back in the day when they had clips, is on his right hip, or the right side of his hip, so he's right-handed. Maybe something that he does with his or her, their body language. They're looking at you a certain way. They're talking to you a certain way. Mm-hmm. Scarier, they're not talking to you at all. They're just looking you dead in the eyes with their intentions. Things to pay attention to as far as body language, situational awareness. So going back to my original question, a lot of people will say here's another one. And, oh man, I can't think of his name. Hold on, it's going to kill me. I have to think of it.
Okay, I want to bring something up.
No, wait, don't say anything because it's going to screw me up. Hold on. I know hate is a strong word. Here's another one. I hate this guy, Chris Watts, that scumbag. That scumbag where when the district attorney was putting in his final statement to put him away, said that he strangled his daughter, and the last thing that she was thinking was fear because the person that she trusted was strangling her to death for no reason. Forensics, and the district attorney pointed out that he was strangling her so hard and that she fought so hard that her upper lip detached from her gums because she was screaming for her life. The man she was supposed to trust was killing her. I hate him. Again, a lot of people say you never saw it coming. Is there any characteristics, anything at all, anything they say, anything they do that we can see these things and prevent them before they happen?
So lay people outside my field always get this wrong. They'll say antisocial, sociopaths. They think they're antisocial, that they don't want to be social. It's just the opposite. They're usually very social. So let's get that right. Antisocial doesn't mean you don't want to socialize. Antisocial means you want to socialize plenty. You just don't want to follow the norms of society. So look for, you understand, you want to
Yeah.
socialize. You just you want to break the rules. So here I have some of the characteristics: failure to obey the laws, engage in behavior from an early age that could result in criminal behavior, lying, manipulation, impulsivity, irritability, aggression, manifested as frequent assaults, blatantly disregards the safety of others, blatantly disregards the feelings of others, patterns of irresponsibility, and the big one, lack of any remorse for their actions. Now, that doesn't mean it all comes out in strong ways. It can be in subtle ways. But those are the patterns of antisocial, and usually very charming and very skilled at things. So the impulsivity, the irritability, the failure to ever take responsibility from a young age, breaking the norms and rules, those are the antisocial people.
So let me stop you there real quick. So now that you're saying something, it makes sense because it's the things that the detectives, and let's just face it, sometimes the news reporters are better detectives than the police. That's
Absolutely.
no disrespect to law enforcement, just law enforcement has boundaries, right? The media has no mercy. It doesn't, that's not a, it's not a right wing, left wing thing. It's just the media has no mercy. That's their job. We know that journalists are hungry. They're hungry for the story. The story can make or break their career. But you just listed everything that comes out after the fact. So you're saying that if you're
Correct.
in a relationship with somebody, or you spend a lot of time with somebody one on one, and what they're doing and what they say and their characteristics just don't make sense, you should pay attention to these things.
And not do that thing and say, but they would never, but they're not,
But
but
they
they
love
might
me.
do this. Right, exactly. But the biggest one, I think, is the lack of remorse, the not having any remorse. And that's what's bothering everybody now. Something happened. Obviously, something happened between Brian and Gabby, and he doesn't seem to have any remorse. It doesn't mean he committed a crime. Of course not. I don't know what happened. Maybe there was a creepy guy. Maybe he panicked and left her, and then he was going to come back and she wasn't there. Who knows? I can't jump to the conclusion that he committed a crime, but I can come to a factual statement that he's not looking like he's proud of whatever he did, or he wants to disclose whatever he did. It doesn't mean it rose to a criminal crime. It could have been negligence. It could have been some kind of neglect. It could have been a fight and he took off because
If
he
they
thought
got
he
into
was
an
doing the
argument
right
and
thing.
if they got into an argument and he shoved her down and she broke her neck, that's manslaughter, not premeditated.
It would depend, it would have to follow a fact specific pattern. But I wasn't even thinking of that. I was thinking of something where he didn't even do anything criminal, but they had a fight and he left her and he thinks nobody will believe it. What nobody's talking about is what it's like to be a man in that situation and the panic and fear that you're going to be accused of a crime, which everybody is doing. So the part that doesn't add up, I'll keep coming back to this, is he's not treating it like a missing person. Why isn't he worried about where she is? That's what's bothering everybody. And that his concern for, hey, I might be accused of a crime seems to be more important than that she's missing. And no compassion for the parents. It makes no sense. Now, his attorney will say, because he lawyered up, his attorney will say, well, anything he says could be used against him, so he really can't say anything. So don't think that I don't think that protecting himself right now is more important than finding her. Hopefully finding her alive. We all pray that we find her alive. But every day that goes by, I'm sure is harder and harder on the family.
So Marla said they had a physical altercation before she went missing. Should we always leave once there's a physical altercation? But I think that goes back to what you said and what you know all too well, which is just he loves me. He didn't mean it. It was an argument. We argue. Couples argue, and then one day.
I think if we're factually correct, I think they said that she slapped him. So I I don't know what happened. Again, that's a general question. I don't know exactly what happened. I think that if, God forbid, he did do something to her, I feel for that police officer who was called and separated them, but didn't take any more action. I'm not blaming that police officer at all, but I won't want to be in their position if a crime was committed, right? Because they'll always second guess and think, should they have done something? I think so, Marla, I'm forgiving. People do lose their temper in 1 minute. John Anthony will tell you that in 1 minute, you can do a lifetime of damage. I'm sure my son is going to agree with that statement. Anger can come in swiftly and take over. I think it's what you do afterwards. It goes back to that remorse. It goes back to that awareness. Do you say, this went too far? I need some help. We both need some help. And then there's a whole other theory that violence can be interactional. It can be setting each other off. So I think that's a broad question. That's for another podcast. But tonight, when you go and think about this case, come back to my haunting question. How do you not treat a missing person like they're missing when they were your partner in life? So we will get an answer. I don't want to guess because I don't think that's a good way to keep an open mind. I want to do what Ryan said, look at all the facts. I don't see any history that they had 911 calls like Nicole Brown had how many 911 calls
There's
before?
tons.
Right. And something we're all forgetting that they had an altercation as young people on the road in a cramped van, and her stepfather said she had OCD. She wanted everything just a certain way. I'm sure there was some stress in that trip. So that doesn't mean that they had altercations prior. No one in the family is saying they saw anything before. So I think we have to be focused on what happened. I don't know. Did they witness a crime of that couple and he got freaked out? I don't know because I don't have all the facts. But I do pray for some peace for the family because can you imagine, Ryan, that one of your kids was missing for that amount of time?
I would never
it's
ever
just-
stop. You wouldn't. I would be a man on fire. Don't tell me. Don't tell me nothing. Don't tell me to slow down. Don't tell me to let the police handle it. Don't tell me anything because I'm not listening to you.
Right. So remember my challenge. Everybody watch those statements, those 100% statements of people saying, oh, they would never. I'm sure this would never happen. Life's random. Here is a situation where it's so random, no previous history. The parents think this is going to be the greatest trip, and one comes home and one doesn't, and one acts totally bizarre. So life is definitely random. But like I said, we can't live with that every single day in the forefront of our brain. So we push it to the back and do the best we can. But I will say, as they ended on one of my favorite shows, be careful out there. What show was that, Rye?
That might be
remember?
Blue.
It's before, close. Hill Street Blues.
Oh, still Dennis Franz. I was close, though. I was close.
Where's Call Up Richard and know if he knew that? I want to know if Richard knew. Be
I think
careful.
he probably did know Hill Street Blues.
I say it to every police officer I treat. Be careful out there.
So as we get to the end of this podcast, as you know, we took a little bit of a different turn. We're often very interested in giving life advice, family advice, and talking about things like that. But I thought that this was important to touch on this topic, and I knew my mom would have a lot of insight. I tell Monica all the time because we watched The People versus O.J. Simpson on FX that I vividly remember my mother giving me the updates throughout the case, that I remember my mom and I watched when the verdict came in, so I knew my mom would have some things to say about this case. And again, we're not saying Brian's guilty. We will say that we hope Gabby is found safe and sound by the next time we meet. Hopefully she's okay wherever she is. But that's where we're going to end it today. Mom, you have anything else?
I was in law school with the O.J. Simpson case was happening, and I do want to say, remember, that was the criminal trial. He was acquitted, but not in the civil trial. He was found guilty. I always like to throw that in, that we remember that he was definitely found guilty in the civil trial. Different standard of evidence. That's why. All right, everybody, remember what I said. Be careful out there. And are we going to get to the show Marla and I wanted to do on forgiveness? I hope so.
Hopefully we can get to that.
Hopefully we'll get to that. All right. We'll hopefully see everybody next week. Get out there and make it a good week, everyone.
We'll see you soon. Take care.